Hey guys, welcome back to Releasethecraftin. This is Priscilla here with another episode of Storycraft. In fact, it's the first episode of what I'm calling Season 2 because I finished all the ones I planned to do last year. So now it's the new year and Season 2 has begun. And so now I am working through viewer requests and doing some stories that I have had on my list for a while that I've been wanting to share with you guys. So right now I'm doing viewer requests specifically from my patrons over on Patreon. So they get like priority requests, and then you guys can also continue to request stories that you would like me to share here. I am taking all requests. They're all on my list. If I did not get to your story last year, I have lost last year's list. So please tell me what story you want to hear so I can make sure that I add it to this year's list, and I will not lose this one. I don't make any promises, but I'm determined not to lose it. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for the new year and excited for the new season. I think some of the stories that are in the pipeline are going to be amazing, including this one, because it's a classic, so how can it not be? But just a little bit of business before we get into the meat of this story. I have started the Grimoire With Me series over on Patreon. It's been amazing. You guys are going to hear me talk about it more because I think it's really fun, and I think it's going to be really beneficial, especially if you are just starting out, or if you are unsure of where to go in your magical book journey, or if you just want some encouragement and ideas to fill up your own magical books. This is it. We've already built the book. We started the first page, and then this month we're going to crack in to doing some other fun pages. It's going to be amazing. It's great. It's fun. It's cool. Also, there's all these freebies and stuff over on my Patreon, so make sure that you check it out. It is linked down below. Also, I added some stuff to my Etsy store. Not like a bunch of stuff, but there's some stuff in there. It's new. Feel free to preview. It's there. And I shall continue to add more things as I create them. And as always, for the ephemera packs that I've added to my Etsy store, you can actually check out my Patreon shop and get them for less than they are in my Etsy shop. And it says that in the description on those links. So if you're unsure if it might be cheaper on Patreon, it says it in the description on my Etsy. So you can always check that to see, and then jump over to Patreon and get them for cheaper, because why pay full price and greedy corporate wages when you could pay me? And a corporation, but less greedy because they don't charge as much. So anyways, that's all I really have for new business. I do have something exciting coming up in the pipeline that I will share with you guys in a little bit. Not right now, a little bit closer to the day of, but I'm very excited. It's going to be a very fun, very spooky sort of thing. So I think you guys will really love that. And yeah, that's it. So let's jump into the story. So I don't know if you know, if you read the title, you already know. If you didn't read the title, what's it like to just click on videos and not know what you're jumping into? That's amazing. I don't have that kind of trust in the world. Today, we're talking about The Little Mermaid, a classic. If you were to list 5 fairy tales, it would be in there because it's just so freaking popular, and then Disney made it popular, and it's a thing. We all know some kind of version of The Little Mermaid. I'm going to tell you guys the sad version. Unfortunately, because it was originally written by Hans Christian Andersen, and I don't know if you guys know this about him, but he was a sad boy, and so he wrote a sad story, and I actually like his version better because it doesn't have the same problems the Disney version has, but it has its own sets of problems, and we're going to get into those. But I did just want to start out by saying, as a child, The Little Mermaid was my favorite Disney movie, of all time, up until I saw Mulan, and then it was game over. My entire perspective on the world has shifted. But wee baby Crafton was in love with The Little Mermaid. I wanted to be a mermaid. Every time we went to the pool, I played mermaids, absolutely obsessed with mermaids. So I actually watched this VHS. I'm dating myself horribly here, but I watched the VHS so many times that it actually wore out, and we had to get a brand new one, which made me more upset because the cover wasn't the same by the time I wore it out. And, tiny little inklings of the obsessive compulsive creature I would one day become, because my mom had to switch the cases to keep me from complaining about the movie because I was convinced it wasn't the same. So that's just a little bit about me, if you guys were wondering, and my connection with this story, why I love it so much. And now we're going to jump into it. So picture it. It's not outside of Denmark. I've seen a lot of people think that the story occurs outside of Denmark. It's in the ocean. he's not really specific in the story. The Disney version is supposed to take place in the Mediterranean. I don't know. I don't really care. It doesn't actually factor into the story. But in the ocean, the vast 70% of the Earth's surface ocean, there is an aquatic kingdom ruled by the Sea King. And I want you guys to know right off the top, nobody has any names in this story. So we're going to do our best. But the Sea King has 5 daughters. Technically he has 6, because the 6 is his youngest, most beautifulest, most preciousest child. And there's these 5 other girls that, like, don't really go into description about. Outside of the fact that, in addition to being very proud of his lovely, beautiful daughters, each of these daughters spends their days cultivating their own special fancy garden, like underwater aquatic garden, with like beautiful sea plants and sea flowers and sea trees. There's trees, all on the ocean floor outside of the kingdom, outside of the palace. And each of these sisters have their own unique style. They don't really go into what each particular sister has, but they all have their own unique styled garden with their own favorite things and elements and stuff like that to it. Our littlest of mermaid princesses, the perfect child, the child, can't stress that enough. She has her own garden too, but the thing that sets her garden apart from everyone else is that it is just full of, hold on. Okay, I really should learn to close my window before I start recording these, but I don't. So at any rate, the Little Mermaid has a very special garden. The thing that makes her garden super special is that it's just full of red flowers. A ton of red flowers. That's all she has in her garden. She also has like a statue of a boy, but that's not really important. It's just some stuff that's like left behind from shipwreck things. Her sisters also have like shipwreck leftovers in their garden, so it's not like taboo in this version of the story like it is in the Disney version. Another interesting aspect about the Little Mermaid's like kingdom society is that once they reach of age, they're allowed to go to the surface. They're actually like a big production made about them becoming old enough and getting to rise to the surface and go check things out. And her sisters, who are all of age and have been of age for a minute, are all like regular visitors of the surface and like to go up there and sing their songs and maybe questionably lure sailors to their untimely demise. It's not really specified, but it's really implied that her sisters might actually be sirens. And that's like a whole thing that I find really interesting that we just skim right over. So in addition to this like coming of age tradition that our Little Mermaid is looking forward to, because she's not like super fascinated with the surface, but she's kind of really fascinated with the surface, because you see, the reason her garden is entirely red is that is like the closest she could get to mimicking the way that the sunlight dances off like the top of the ocean. So like that was her artistic call out, was that it is red, and so she made her garden red. So she's a little bit into it. She wants to know what's up there. She's a little fascinated, maybe a little bit obsessed, not like super obsessed, but a little bit obsessed with going. So she's really looking forward to this coming of age thing. And so in addition to that, these girls are also taken care of by their elderly grandmother, who isn't just old, but like really old, but also like a little bit upper class nobility, like out of touch old, because I guess there's like a fashion trend underwater where the mermaids essentially get like little fin piercings by using like clams that they attach to the end of their fin. And normally it's sort of I guess the norm for the upperest of upper class ladies to have 6 of these little clams like attached to their tail fins, but the grandmother has 12 because she's just that much better than everyone else. And I kind of fuck with that. Like, I really appreciate her for being unapologetic about that in particular, and just sort of, choosing to wear whatever she chooses to wear, although to also be doubly fair, it's painful. And we learn that when it is finally the Littlest Mermaid's birthday, and she has now come of age, and so they are all preparing her. Her sisters and her grandmother are all preparing her. They're brushing her hair. They're putting on nice jewelry for her, getting her all like dolled up so she can go up to the surface and see it for the first time. And her grandmother makes her wear 8. 8 of these little like clams attached to her fin. They could be oysters. I don't know what the difference is. Salt water versus saltier water, colder, saltier water. At any rate, she makes her wear 8 of these, and the Littlest Mermaid thinks about it, and she's like, wow, that really freaking hurts. But she has to do it because you have to suffer for beauty, which is a horrible, horrible message to give to children, grandma. So, the Little Mermaid goes up to the surface, and when she gets up there, she is delighted by the sunshine, the fresh air. Everything is like super amazing to her, and she happens upon a ship with a prince who is celebrating his birthday, and she is like absolutely wowed by the birthday celebration. She can't like help but think about how handsome the prince is and how great he seems to be, and she's just having a general good time until a storm hits. And in some versions that I've read, I don't know because I don't have the original version in my hand, but some versions that I read, her sisters may have actually sung that storm into existence just for funsies. And, like, again, the sisters are so interesting, but we don't focus on them, and that makes me frustrated. But there is a shipwreck. The ship sinks, and the prince goes overboard, and just like in the Disney version, the Littlest Mermaid goes and she saves the prince, right? And she swims him back to shore. And the whole time she's swimming him back to shore, she's like a little bit frantic because she doesn't really like know human biology that much. So she's like, God, I hope he survives. I better kiss him a lot to keep him alive. That's her solution. Not like make sure his head is above water or anything like that. But if I just keep giving him a bunch of kisses while he's unconscious, hopefully that'll be enough to make sure that he makes it to the shore. So when she does finally get to the shore, she gets him all the way dragged out there onto the beach. And then she just leaves after giving him one final kiss. She doesn't sing to him. She doesn't do anything like that. She just leaves him there and then takes off back into the water and hopes for the best. And what happens is she actually leaves him on the shore in front of an old, like, church. And when the sun comes up, a bunch of these young women exit the church. And I don't know why they're there. Are they nuns? Are they school children? Is the school in a church? Like, I don't know. But all these young women come out to the beach to do like their morning walk, I guess, and they see the prince washed up on shore, so they rush out to get him. And the person who gets there first is also the youngest and prettiest of the bunch. And they are able to take the prince, back inside and, I don't know, revive him so that he can return home and, everything will be hunky-dory. And he lives. He lives. The kisses worked. The kisses absolutely worked. He made it out okay, right? Meanwhile, the Little Mermaid goes back home and she tells her sisters about what happened. She's telling them about the prince, everything she saw. She's so excited. She's so enamored. And they're like, great. Glad you had a great time. Now get back to like princess business because you did it. You visited the surface. You've seen all that you need to see. It's not really that interesting up there, but if you wanted to join us while we drown like men and sink ships, that would be cool. And she doesn't do that because she's not as interesting as her sisters. I'm sorry. I hate to say it, but she's not. So what ends up happening is over the next couple of weeks, she spends her time sort of pining about her experiences, making small little journeys, to the surface to check things out, and then returning home and just sort of like gradually gaslighting herself into falling in love with the prince. She sort of hypes him up in her brain a lot to the point where she's like, God, I really love him. And while she's thinking about this and sort of wistfully going on about it, her grandmother is telling her all sorts of like horrible stories because while her grandmother is kind of cool, she's also kind of mean and like not really in touch with anybody for any reason. So the grandmother tells her that the thing that makes mermaids better than humans is that they get to live for 300 years. And they get to live that long because they don't have souls. Humans, however, have souls. So when they die after their regular human lifespan, they get to go to heaven. And mermaids don't. They just turn into sea foam and disappear forever. And listening to this, the Little Mermaid's like, oh my God. I'm gonna put this little love story I was giving myself onto the back burner because now I'm having an existential crisis. And that's what, like, the crux of this story is about. This is what drives the Little Mermaid, through the rest of the plot, you guys, is her fear of not having a soul. In fact, she is so upset that she doesn't have a soul and she doesn't get to go to heaven like humans do that she tells her sisters about it. And her sister's like, okay, we've been listening to you talk about this freaking dude for weeks, and now all of a sudden grandma got under your scales and you're a little bit scared and you don't know what to do about death even though you're super young and you're not dying anytime soon. But okay, we're going to help you out here. We're going to tell you the business. So her sisters are like, hey, I actually know where your prince is from. If you want directions, here. So she basically plots out a course, tells her, go this way, you're going to find your prince. You know, maybe he can help you with whatever the heck you got going on. Maybe you can just stop telling us about how you're crushing on this guy because we have more important things to do, like drown men and sink ships. And then her other sisters are like, well, I don't really want to tell you this, but like, if you wanted to actually go to the surface and be with this guy that you're so obsessed with and get out of our hair and stop talking about death all the time, you could go visit the sea witch and she could be able to help you, maybe possibly, like, you know, kind of, sort of, go to the surface to be with this dude. And the Little Mermaid is like, oh, bet, like, this is going to solve my problems immediately. So she takes off. She follows her sister's directions, and she goes to the place that no mermaid has ever gone before, which I don't understand because how do they know where it is? How do they know where the sea witch lives if no mermaid has ever been there? How do they give her directions if no one's ever been there? They all just know and nobody goes? I don't understand. The story doesn't go into it. But she goes to the place where no mermaid has ever been before, and she happens upon the home of the sea witch. And this place is like a ship graveyard. Like, all the shipwrecks somehow all drift to this place because there are just empty, abandoned, rotting ship after ship after ship. And then, like, the corpses of men, bones, everything strewn around, all on the ocean floor. And she has to swim through that to get to the sea witch's home. And there's also, like, little grabby things. Not like the little polyps in the Little Mermaid thing, but not super different from that. But there is stuff trying to, like, grab her and drag her down. There's also mermaid bones, which implies that a mermaid has been there before. They just haven't returned. So again, how do they know how to get there? I digress. So she finally makes it up to the sea witch's home, which is not a cave, but a home built entirely out of the bones of drowned men, which is a little bit hardcore. So when she gets there, she tells the sea witch everything, that she's in love with this boy whose life she saved. She wants to be with the prince, but also that she has a lot of feelings about not having a soul, and she doesn't know what to do about it, but she really wants to sort of resolve that, maybe find a soul in the process of, like, also being united with her one true love that she's never spoken to or interacted with in any way, shape whatsoever, outside of giving him lots of non-consensual kisses while she saved him. And the sea witch is like, whoa. This is a business. This is a business, not therapy. This is a business. I would be more than happy to help you with your problem. In fact, I can tell you that both of your issues have the same solution. I can give you legs so that you can walk on land and be with your prince. And in the process, if you marry a human man, part of his soul will go into you and you will have your own soul from the union of your love. And I will let you guys infer what that means because it's sort of implied to not be marriage as the thing that makes the soul go from one person to another. Fill in the gaps. So she tells, the Little Mermaid, you can have a soul. All you got to do is get a human man to love you and then marry you and maybe do some other stuff too. And she's like, however, like I said, this is a business. So I can do that for you, but you have to pay me. And the cost will be your voice. And, I don't know, I didn't really bring this up earlier because it doesn't really factor much into the story, but the Little Mermaid has the prettiest voice in the entire ocean. So she's like, oh, That's like my super defining feature and talent. And the sea witch is like, I don't care. That's the cost of business, babe. So she thinks about it and she's like, yeah, okay, I'm down. I can do this. And she's like, I just want you to know, before you purchase, I'm going to give you legs. I basically have to cut apart your fin to do so. So every step you take on land will be like 1,000 knives are stabbing into your feet at all times. It'll never go away. You'll have that pain for the rest of your life. Also, because I have to cut apart your fin to make this happen, you can't come back once you get up there. You're going to be a human forever. And also, if the person you love marries somebody else and not you, you're going to turn into sea foam, babe. Like, you don't win if you don't make this man marry you. And the Little Mermaid's like, okay, yeah, no problem. I got this. I can do this. Not a problem. Actually, these consequences aren't nearly as dire or concerning as like a normal person would consider. I'm down for this. I'm willing to do it. So the sea witch is like, all right. So what she does, she makes up her potion, she gives it to her, and she does exactly what she says. She takes her voice, but not in like a magical fun way. No, she cuts out her tongue. She cuts that out. She keeps that. So the Little Mermaid will never speak again under any circumstances because she has no tongue. And then she cuts apart her fin and sends her back up to the surface. And so somehow the Little Mermaid, who has never swum with legs before, makes it to the surface and then somehow manages to get washed on shore in the exact place she needs to be because she is found that morning by her prince. And this prince is like, look at this pretty girl just washed up on my beach. How convenient. Because remember, guys, he was unconscious when the Little Mermaid left him on the shore. She didn't stay around to like sing him a song and wait till he came back to consciousness. He's never seen her before, has no idea who she is or that she saved him. So he's like, interesting. And he's like, how did you get here? And she opens her mouth to speak. And of course, a bunch of blood rushes out because her tongue got cut out. She doesn't have anything to say. The prince is like, that's concerning, but you're really freaking cute and you're naked. So, yeah, I'm going to take you home. I'm going to take you home. And from here, guys, the prince is the worst. Just want you to know the prince is the worst. So he takes her home. They get her cleaned up. They get her walking. They get her dressed. All the things, right? And she can't talk. So the prince is like, that's kind of funny. Why don't you be one of my servant girls? Because I don't see any other use for you. You don't speak. And you guys won't ever believe this, but he doesn't have his servant girls do like normal like housework stuff for him. They have to sing for him. So the 8 other girls who serve the prince sing him delightful songs while he eats and dines away. And the Little Mermaid, who is now realizing that every step being 1,000 knives is awful, and also she has like the remnants of the whole riveting still happening to her, the after effects. And so occasionally her feet bleed a little bit and they bleed into her shoes a little bit. And she's not really comfortable at any point in time. But she realizes that, she's not going to impress her prince any way, shape, or form if she can't sing with the other girls. She doesn't have her voice. So instead she dances. And it turns out, even through all the pain, she is a beautiful dancer, more graceful than anybody has ever been on 2 feet before. She is an amazing dancer, and this absolutely enthralls the prince, and he is delighted that she has this skill to charm him and entertain him. And so he's like, perfect, amazing. I have never, ever, ever, and will never, ever, ever regret the decision to pick you up from the beach. You're going to come with me and be like my little foundling. And in a horrendous turn of phrase, he calls her his dumb foundling, because she's mute, which is horrible. We're not going to do that. So the prince takes her around. He gets like male clothes made for her so that she can also ride on a horse with him and go on his little adventures throughout the days. And they spend their time hanging out and basically being like little best buddies. But also, because the prince is the worst, he lets her sleep on the floor beside his bed, and in some versions outside the door of his bedroom. But most of the time he's like, I like you. You can sleep in my room on the floor like a pet, because that's how he looks at her. There's sort of this weird dynamic where it's like he's looking at her like a small child because she's not really familiar with how like things are supposed to be done. She also can't speak for herself. So he's like, what an idiot. You're like a stupid little kid to me, but I'm going to take care of you. In other like ways he looks at her, she's like a pet. And occasionally he's like, I think you might be my best friend, because he just confides in her and tells her all sorts of stuff, and she goes with him everywhere, silently, catering to his every freaking whim. The prince is the worst. So while they're doing this, they're doing their little best buddy routine. The prince is like, oh, hey, have you met this girl? She saved me when I almost drowned. Turns out the girl that actually was the first person to find him on the beach and like get him dragged back into the church so they could revive him and like send him back home, that girl was a princess. She was just there visiting the church for some reason. And she's a very beautiful princess. And so they're already engaged to be wed. The Little Mermaid had no idea. So he's like, hey, we're going to get married and you're going to come with me and be like my little friend forever. Which is horrible. So the Little Mermaid is like destitute because she absolutely loves the prince. All through this like time, this whole treatment, never wavers her love and affection for the prince. She's still dedicated and devoted to him. She's happy to be by his side. And then she like sort of in a weird, super mature like turnabout, she sees how happy he is with his future bride. And she's happy for him to move on without her, even though she knows what that means for her. So they get married at sea. They bring the Little Mermaid with them. There's a big celebration, big party. And then that night, you know, the lovers go off. They go have their little honeymoon thing in their cabin. And the Little Mermaid is sort of left by herself. She knows she doesn't have much more time left because now that he's married, she's going to die. And when she is all by herself on the deck of the ship, she looks out into the water. And what happens? These 5 bald-headed women pop up from the surface of the water. Turns out it's her sisters. And what they had done was they cut off all their hair and gave it to the sea witch for a solution to bring their sister back home to them, because they are infinitely better characters than anybody else in this damn story. So her sisters loved her so much that they gave up all their beautiful long hair to get a special tool from the sea witch so that she could come home. Turns out it was a knife. So they give it to their sister and they're like, Little, what you need to do is go into that cabin, stab the prince. When his blood touches your feet, they will return to fins and you can come home and live the rest of your life as a mermaid with the rest of us. Just do that and come home, please. We beg you. We gave up our hair for this. We love you so much. We want you to come home. In fact, Grandma is so worried about you. All of her hair fell out before we even went to the sea witch. So all of us are bald because we love you so much. And the Little Mermaid's like, wow, that's amazing. I am really moved by your love. I'm going to go do that right now. So she takes the knife. She sneaks into the prince's cabin. She sees him sleeping there peacefully with his new bride. And she just gives him a kiss on the forehead, puts the knife down, and walks out because she can't do it. She still loves the prince so much, and she's not living in that if I can't have him, nobody else can, like, universe. She's a better person than I am, I think. I don't think I'd have the strength to do that. But she's like, I don't want to do this. I'm okay. I've accepted my fate. This is the consequences of my actions, and I love this man too much to take his life from him and his happiness from him, and I don't wish his bride any ill will, and I don't want her to suffer either. So she walks out back onto the deck of the ship. I don't know where her sisters went. They never factor again into the story. It makes me very sad. And she prepares to turn into sea foam when the sun rises. And what happens instead, as she starts to sort of dissolve away, is she is greeted by the spirits of the air. And they tell her that because she did so many good deeds in her lifetime, the 2 where she saved the prince and then chose not to murder him, those so many good deeds too, that she's going to join them. She's not going to turn into sea foam. She's going to join them. And essentially, the spirits of the air are sort of seen in like a fairy-ish sense, but they're more like little guardian angels. And I'll tell you why. Because what the whole spirits of the air do is they sort of fly around to do more good deeds and help people out as like air elementals. But what happens is when they go to visit a new home, if there's a child in that home that is good, they get a year off their 100 years of service thing. Because what happens when you're a spirit of the air is you get 100 years of service that you have to complete doing good deeds and like general well-being, happy-go-lucky stuff. And at the end of the 100 years, you get to have a soul and move on to heaven. So this is everything the Little Mermaid wanted, right? She wanted a soul so badly because she didn't want to turn into sea foam and disappear forever. So she, as a spirit of the air, will get to go visit, these different homes, help people out. And when she goes to a home where a child is good and well behaved, she gets a year knocked off her 100-year sentence, which is great, right? She only has to visit 100 homes and she gets to go to heaven and be happy forever. But if she goes to a home and the child is rotten, she gets a year added on. And I don't know how many kids you've met, but I don't think the odds are super in her favor on this. It seems really mean. Like it's going to take an extra long time because now you got to be afraid of which house you're going into, if they're going to add more time to your sentence or not. But you got to help people if you want to move on. So at any rate, this is what she gets to do. The Little Mermaid gets to turn into a spirit of the air and fly around and do good deeds and hopefully meet 100 good children, or, do her 100 years unbothered without interacting with any children who would impact her sentence. And then she will get the human soul that she wants so desperately, and she'll get to move on to heaven and live a peaceful, happy afterlife. And that's as close to a happily ever after as we're going to get here. I guess it is kind of happily ever after, but maybe tell your kids to behave. That's the final little tagline moral at the end of the story. Behave or you're cursing the Little Mermaid to suffer forever having to do good deeds trying to get into heaven, which seems really unfair to her because she already suffered quite a bit. I never read the story. I don't know why I'm so mad. That's the end. That's the end of the story. The prince gets to fuck off and live his happy life. The sisters will eventually regrow their hair and then lament that they invested so much in the sister who didn't really care about the sacrifices they made for her. The end. There is a version, the original draft version of The Little Mermaid does have her just turn into sea foam at the end, but I think Anderson remembered that he was writing a story for children, so he was like, let me just add this little moral quandary at the end to make kids feel bad for the Little Mermaid so that they don't act like little shits, and then the parents will appreciate me too at the end of this very sad, very tragic story. But there is a version where she just turns into sea foam, and that's the end of the story. She doesn't get to go to heaven, she doesn't get her soul. The whole thing was a wasted experience. So I guess at the end of it, although it's a little bittersweet, this is a better alternative for the Little Mermaid than just sort of disappearing forever and having all of her hopes and dreams turn into nothingness. It is really interesting to me in this story how the Little Mermaid's faith in the prince and sort of in her belief in him never wavers, even though he treats her like absolute dog doo-doo the entire time. I could never, but I'm just going to write that off as a different time, story written by a man, all sorts of things, because I couldn't do it. But she does. And I'm really impressed at her for that, because that's a willpower level I don't have. I have not unlocked. Another side note, an interesting little fact that I think a lot of people have tossed out, but it's not a new fact. It's just an interesting fact. But there's a lot of evidence to sort of allude to the fact or imply that this story of the Little Mermaid might actually be a story about Hans Christian Andersen and his unrequited love for another man. So he's, in addition to being a sad boy, he's also gay. I don't know if you guys know this. There's a whole thing about love letters he's written as a gay man to another man, who got married to another woman and went on to live his life. And so you can kind of pick that up in the notes of the story about this unrequited love, about being absolutely dedicated to somebody who probably treats your affection as sort of a arm's length, and that's really cute kind of thing, but I'm not into it because I'm into somebody else and a different thing. So those themes come through really strong in the story of The Little Mermaid, which kind of make me like that version even more. Even though it is a sadder version, because I think, all of us can really relate to the idea of unrequited love. There's been somebody you've crushed on or somebody that you've been just interested in, and then they either rudely or gently rebuffed you and you had to do something with those feelings. And I don't think the process of doing something with those feelings comes through in the tale, but I do think it comes through in the fact that Anderson wrote this tale to deal with his feelings in that matter. And that's a really healthy outlet to sort of put those feelings on paper and let them go. So it just sort of adds a little bit of interest to me to the story. It makes it connect a little bit better. And I think that's why I like Anderson's version better overall. all that to say, I wish he wrote like a whole story about the sisters. I want like a modern author to write a story about her sisters in this like context, because they're so much more interesting than every other character in the story, and I feel like they deserved better. There should be like a whole vengeance arc at the end where they get revenge for their sister, because she basically, sacrificed so much only to get rebuffed, and then they don't know that she turned into a spirit of the air. They don't even know if she turned into sea foam. Like, she's just gone forever because, this guy had no interest in a woman who couldn't speak, and there was no way for her to, like, communicate that she was the one who actually saved him all along. And that's really sad. And I think her sisters deserved a better turn, too. So, like, I really hope, like, a modern author picks up those story beats at some point and writes about it, because I think they deserved a better turn. I think they deserve their own story. And also, I just want to, like, have a mermaid land war. I think that would be fun. But that is going to be it for me, guys. That's every thought I have. Well, not every thought. It's the current thoughts I have about The Little Mermaid. Let me know what you guys think about it, and what you're looking forward to in Storycraft Season 2. If there is a story that you were looking forward to that I haven't done yet, and you thought, hey, by now I would have figured you would have done this, tell me what that is. Because like I said, I'm always taking requests, but also for the sake of transparency, I do give my patrons priority requests. But also, just a side note, you can be my patron for free. There's a free option. And you can join the chat, because the chat is free on Patreon. It's open to every member of my Patreon. So you can join that chat and then tell me your story request, and then you would also have a priority story request. That's kind of cool. That's gonna be it for me, you guys. As always, I appreciate your faces, and I will catch you guys all in the next one. Until then, happy crafting. Bye.